Imagine this. You're standing in the Arctic cold, so bitter it feels like nature's deep freezer. A fish you just caught freezes solid in your hands within seconds. Now imagine that one frozen fish sparking a multi-million-dollar idea that changes how the whole world eats. This isn't a tall tale, it's the real origin story of frozen food and the Birdseye brand. A story that involves an adventurous college dropout, an epic failure, a $22 million twist of fate, and even a frozen turkey dinner on a socialite's yacht. Welcome to the Business Scrapbook, where we dive into amazing business stories. Today, we're unearthing the cool journey of Clarence Birdseye, the man who turned frostbitten fish into a food revolution. Clarence Birdseye wasn't your typical early 1900s guy. As a kid, he was obsessed with bugs and even taught himself taxidermy. His college buddies literally nicknamed him Bugs. He had a natural curiosity and a taste for adventure. By his 20s, Birdseye found himself working as a field naturalist for the US government. In 1912, that itch for exploration led him way north to Labrador, Canada, a frigid frontier that would become the birthplace of his big idea. In Labrador, Birdseye was supposed to be surveying wildlife and even dabbled in the fur trade, raising foxes on a remote ranch. But what really caught his eye wasn't the foxes, it was fish. One freezing day, he went ice fishing with local Inuit companions. They pulled fish out of holes in the water, and in minus 40 degrees Celsius weather, those fish froze rock solid almost instantly. Birdseye was stunned. Back home, any frozen fish turned to mush when thawed. Gross. But here in the brutal Arctic cold, the fish that froze quickly still tasted fresh and firm when cooked later. As Birdseye later recalled, some of these fish were even still alive after thawing. That's how well the quick freezing preserved them. It was like a light bulb lit up in his mind. He thought, why not use this flash freeze trick to preserve food everywhere? Little did he know, this frosty eureka moment would send him on a roller coaster journey. From nearly going broke trying to sell frozen fish to inventing crazy new machines and eventually selling his idea for a fortune. But we're not there yet. First, Clarence had to try and spectacularly fail to bring Arctic-style freezing to the masses. When Birdseye returned to the States, he couldn't shake the idea of quick frozen food. He saw a huge problem to solve. Fishermen were catching plenty of fish, but much of the fresh catch spoiled before it even reached consumers. Meat and veggies rotted in transport or had to be canned or dried into sad, flavorless versions of themselves. If only he could flash freeze foods like those Inuit froze fish. People could have fresh food months later without it turning into a soggy mess. Clarence Birdseye was on a mission to stop food from going bad, and maybe make a buck or two in the process. In 1922, with Arctic inspiration fueling him, Birdseye started his first company, Birdseye Seafoods Incorporated. He set up in New York and began experimenting with freezing fish fillets commercially. Now keep in mind, nobody was doing this successfully at the time. Freezing food wasn't new in theory, but most methods froze stuff too slowly, which made giant ice crystals that wrecked the texture. Birdseye tried a faster freezing technique, using chilled air around minus 43 degrees Celsius to freeze fish fillets. It sounded promising, in theory at least. So, did the world immediately embrace Birdseye's superfish? Not even close. In fact, you could say his first venture went ice cold in the market. By 1924, Birdseye Seafoods went bankrupt for lack of consumer interest. Turns out, 1920s consumers weren't exactly clamoring for frozen fish dinners. Many didn't trust frozen food, with good reason, since early attempts were nasty and most stores didn't even have freezers to stock the product. Imagine trying to sell someone on frozen fish fillet in an era when refrigerators were a luxury and iceboxes were the norm. It's like trying to sell smartphones in a town with no electricity. Simply put, the idea was too ahead of its time, and Birdseye's fish fillets just sat there, cold and lonely, with no buyers. Clarence had learned his first big business lesson. Having a brilliant idea is one thing, but getting people to buy in is another. And here's where a lesser entrepreneur might have thrown in the towel or thrown out the fish. Not Birdseye. Clarence was just getting started. In the same year his company tanked, he went back to the drawing board, determined to crack the code of commercial quick freezing. Birdseye knew his idea was solid, or rather, frozen solid. The concept was proven, he had seen it work in the Arctic. So why weren't his products catching on? He realized the method needed an upgrade. So, in 1924, Birdseye rolled up his sleeves and invented a new and improved freezing process. Instead of just cold air, he would pack fish into cartons and press them between two extremely cold metal plates under pressure. It was like a giant icy sandwich press. The food would freeze faster and more uniformly. This was the birth of flash freezing as we know it. Freeze the food fast and at ultra low temperatures so it doesn't have time to form ice crystals that turn it to mush. With a better process in hand, Birdseye launched a new company called General Seafood Corporation to commercialize his invention. He moved operations to Gloucester, Massachusetts, a coastal fishing town in 1925. Gloucester was the perfect place to source fresh fish and freeze them on the spot. Birdseye was now obsessed, in a good way, inventing all sorts of contraptions to freeze food faster and better. He created the double belt freezer. Imagine 2 conveyor belts chilled with cold brine clamping down on packaged fish fillets, zooming through. Cool and efficient. He also patented a multi-plate freezer in 1927, an improved multi-stack machine that became an industry standard for decades. The guy was on a freezing frenzy. By the end, he would hold around 168 patents related to freezing technology, packaging, and more. Birdseye was like the Thomas Edison of frozen food, tinkering non-stop until he got it right. Still, even with great tech, Birdseye faced a chilly reality. In the 1920s, the infrastructure just wasn't ready for frozen food. Most Americans didn't even have a freezer at home, just simple ice boxes. Refrigerated trucks and warehouses were rudimentary, and grocery stores certainly didn't have freezer sections yet. It's the classic chicken and egg problem, or perhaps peas and freezer problem. People won't buy frozen food if they can't keep it frozen, and businesses won't invest in freezers if there's no food to sell. Birdseye was fighting not just for his product, but for an entire cold chain system that he had to build from scratch. For a while, he sold mostly to hotels and institutions that had their own ice-cooled storage. Wider success still eluded him, until a game-changing opportunity arrived, one that would bring the heat, or rather the cold. That's Birdseye's idea needed. By the late 1920s, Birdseye had proven his quick freeze concept and built a modest business, but he needed serious investment to go big. Who would bite? Answer came sailing in, quite literally, on a luxury yacht in the form of the richest woman in America. Enter Marjorie Merriweather Post, heiress, business magnate, and a woman with a keen eye for opportunity. Marjorie was the owner of the Postum cereal company and was always looking to expand into new food markets. Legend has it that one evening aboard her fancy yacht, Marjorie's chef served her a meal featuring a whole turkey that had been frozen using Birdseye's method. Expecting it to taste like dried out old bird, she was astonished to find the turkey delicious, nearly as good as fresh. That got her attention real fast. If a frozen turkey could impress her, imagine the potential. Marjorie saw what most people at the time did not. Birdseye's flash frozen foods weren't just a gimmick, they were the future. In 1929, Marjorie Post, backed by some financial muscle from Goldman Sachs, made Clarence Birdseye an offer colder than a New England winter, but in a good way. She bought Birdseye's company, General Seafood Corporation, along with all the patents, for an eye-popping $22 million. That's roughly equivalent to over $300 million today. She realized this frozen food thing was the real deal. Overnight, Clarence Birdseye went from an ambitious inventor struggling to sell fish to a very wealthy inventor with a giant corporate ally. Post folded Birdseye's operations into her company, which she soon renamed General Foods to reflect the growing empire beyond cereal. Importantly, she kept Birdseye on the team as a vice president and resident frozen food wizard. This is when Birdseye, the brand name we know today, truly hatched. Post and Birdseye rebranded the business as Birdseye's Frosted Foods, capitalizing on Birdseye's now well-known name and expertise. With General Foods' deep pockets and marketing savvy, they were finally ready to do something no one had done before: convince everyday Americans to actually buy and eat frozen foods at home. Challenge accepted. With the big guns behind it, Birdseye needed to win over skeptical consumers. So they started small. A pilot program to prove that folks would embrace this frozen wonder. In March 1930, Birdseye launched its first line of quick frozen foods in a carefully chosen trial location: Springfield, Massachusetts. Why Springfield? Possibly because it was a mid-sized all-American city, the perfect guinea pig for this frosty experiment. They rolled out a variety of 26 different products to test, ranging from meats to spinach, peas, fruits, and of course, fish fillets. Fun fact, the very first item sold in this trial was reportedly frozen spinach at Davidson's Market in Springfield. At first, people were cautious. Remember, frozen food had a sketchy reputation in the past. Slow frozen foods were mushy and bland. Birdseye had to earn the public's trust, one peas and carrots bag at a time. The packaging even called them frosted foods instead of frozen, to sound a bit more appealing and novel. Sales in that initial trial were slow but steady. Not a sellout, but promising enough. Customers who gave it a shot realized, hey, this frozen stuff actually tastes pretty good and lasts longer than fresh. Slowly, the ice started to crack, pun intended. By the end of 1930, those test stores were selling a decent array of frozen veggies, fruits, and fish, and consumers were coming back for more. The concept was proving itself in real grocery aisles. Yet, a new logistical problem cropped up. Where to put all this frozen food? Grocery stores had no dedicated freezers. In the Springfield trial, some shops literally stashed Birdseye's packages in the ice cream cabinets, whatever it took to keep them cold. General Foods quickly realized that to scale up, they'd have to help build the infrastructure. So Birdseye, with Post backing, did something clever. They provided freezers to retailers. Big, glass-topped freezer chests, basically giving stores the equipment needed to properly stock the new products. It was an early example of, if you build it, they will come. Stores got modern free freezer units, and Birdseye got guaranteed shelf space, or rather cold space, for their goods. By 1933, just a few years after the Springfield experiment, over 500 stores were selling Birdseye's frozen foods, each outfitted with shiny new freezers to entice customers. The frozen food aisle was officially open for business. As the 1930s rolled on, more Americans started to warm up to frozen food. Birdseye expanded beyond Massachusetts, and General Foods poured money into advertising this strange new idea of frosted foods that could be as good as fresh. They had to educate people, explain why quick freezing preserved quality, why it was safe, and how convenient it could be. Slowly but surely, the public's mindset began to shift. It certainly helped that as time went on, more homes got refrigerators with freezer compartments, and more shops installed commercial freezers. The timing turned out to be fortuitous. By the late 1930s and into the 1940s, technology and consumer habits were finally catching up to Clarence Birdseye's vision. Then came World War II. You wouldn't think war would have anything to do with TV dinners, but it did. With so many men drafted and women working long hours in factories, convenience in the kitchen became a lifesaver at home. Frozen foods fit the bill perfectly. Quick to prepare and nutritious and long-lasting. Birdseye products saw a surge in popularity as families discovered the convenience of having vegetables and meat that wouldn't spoil. By the mid-1940s, frozen food was no longer a novelty. It was practically a necessity for many households. Clarence Birdseye's once weird idea had become a mainstay of the American diet, and the frozen food industry was thriving. Clarence Birdseye continued to innovate through these years. He remained with General Foods as a sort of research guru, always tweaking processes and cooking up new ideas. He never stopped being that curious naturalist at heart, except instead of collecting bugs, he was perfecting frozen broccoli and inventing freezer-safe packaging. In 1949, he was honored with the Institute of Food Technologists Babcock Hart Award for his contributions to food technology. Not bad for a guy whose first business went belly up selling frozen fish. And speaking of future trends, Birdseye was actually ahead of the curve on ready-made frozen meals too. They tested out a frozen TV dinner style single-serve meal as early as 1939, more than a decade before the famous Swanson TV dinners hit the market. The man was truly obsessed with making life easier through frozen food, and many of his 168 patents went beyond just freezing, covering packaging innovations that kept food fresh longer. Clarence Birdseye passed away in 1956, leaving behind one chilling legacy. I'm sorry, I had to. In just a few decades, he had gone from tinkering with frozen fish in a makeshift lab to literally changing how the entire world preserves and eats food. Today, the Birdseye brand is still a leading name in frozen foods, known from the US to Europe as a symbol of quality quick frozen veggies, meats and meals. Every time you stroll down the frozen aisle of a supermarket and toss a bag of peas or a pizza in your cart, you're enjoying the fruits and veggies of Birdseye's invention. He's even been posthumously inducted into the Inventors Hall of Fame for quite literally inventing the frozen food industry. And it's not just the products. Birdseye's work helped build out the cold chain infrastructure, refrigerated trucks, cold storage warehouses, supermarket freezers. That whole system owes a lot to his early vision. He basically pioneered an entire industry from scratch. Few innovators can say they've impacted what people eat on such a massive scale. What's also amazing is how relatable Birdseye's journey is when you step back and look at it. It's a classic tale of innovation. See a problem, get a crazy idea, then face a ton of skepticism and endure early failures. Birdseye could have given up when his first company failed, but instead, he doubled down on R&D and proved his method worked. He slogged through years when nobody else believed in him until finally the right partner, Marjorie Post, came along who got it. With that support, he turned his frosty idea into a nationwide reality. It's a story every entrepreneur can appreciate. Sometimes you're just ahead of your time, and you need persistence and maybe a bit of luck to see success. Oh, and one more fun tidbit. Ever wonder what the first colour TV commercial in the UK was advertising? It was Birdseye's peas. In 1969, a testament to how iconic the brand had become. It reportedly only cost £23 to air, which is mind-blowing even for the 60s. The frozen food revolution Birdseye started had officially conquered kitchens on both sides of the Atlantic, and pop culture to boot. So, the next time you grab a bag of frozen peas or fish sticks from your freezer, think of Clarence Birdseye. The adventurous spirit who learned an old trick from Inuit fishermen, nearly froze his toes off in Labrador, failed gloriously, then persisted and built an empire out of ice. His story reminds us that innovation can come from anywhere, even a remote icy fishing hole. And that sometimes the coolest ideas take a while to catch on. Thank you for watching this frosty tale on the Business Scrapbook. If you enjoyed this adventure, make sure to subscribe. We've got plenty more insightful and amazing business stories to share.